So I've always been a big fan of giving Tanjiro different breathing styles. And a lot of people, they'll look at it and be like, well, we all know that sun breathing is the end all be all, and that sun breathing is, well, the combination of practically every single breathing style. Now, with that said, I do like to get really creative with some of these Tanjiro breathing styles, just because I think it makes, well, the interactions a little bit more fun and a little bit more fantasy. Because at the end of the day, we all know what happens at the very end of Demon Slayer, and a lot of these what ifs don't necessarily change the ending that much. So I decided, what would have happened if I gave Tanjiro a brand new breathing style, and that would be shadow breathing. So this is what if Tanjiro had shadow breathing. Now, I'm not going to waste that much more of your time. I just want to dive right into the story. So we're going to start from the very beginning, but we're going to accelerate it just a little bit more, or just a little bit. Now, for starters, I want to talk about when his family would pass on. Now, this time around, he would enter the landscape and enter his home, seeing that his whole family was actually murdered. And this would break him eternally or internally, and frankly, he would be absolutely beyond himself. But this time around, his sister Nezuko would not be alive. He would look to see if she was okay, and his whole family if they were okay, but he would quickly realize that none of them are actually alive. This would depress him and actually basically make him extremely broken, and this would kind of break his personality to a large extent. This would make him feel that he was a failure, that he failed his own family. Yes, as the audience, we understand that there would have been nothing he could have done even if he was there, but there is massive complications to being the only person surviving, other known as survivor's guilt. And this guilt would put him into the darkness, and this is where shadow breathing would actually come about. He would begin to be clouded by a massive amount of darkness, and he would be shrouded in this darkness, as if all the light in his life begins to fade away, and it seems that this eternal shadow is now cast upon him. As he looks around, he can see that there are these shadows, as if there's like mirages of more or less his family that used to exist, but even in his own head, it begins to kind of mess with him internally, at the fact that he now sees these shadows of his dead family, his mother, his sisters, his brothers, all of these things, and it frankly breaks him. It makes him feel horrible. So when he decides to basically leave his household, because at the end of the day, he's not going to sit around and basically be around these, well, corpses, he leaves and the shadows feel like they follow him. Now, this is where things do change quite a bit, because Tomioka does come across Tanjiro, but he comes across him in a different kind of sort of way. He's been tracking who he doesn't know to actually be Muzan to this point, and he finds Tanjiro walking around completely covered and soaked basically in blood, but also giving off an aura that he can't really explain. It's as if this aura is kind of surrounded by death itself, and it's similar to what some demons actually have, and just in terms of the absolute aura of, well, death or murder. Now, Tanjiro didn't murder anybody, let's make that very clear, but to him, he feels like he kind of did, just because he wasn't there to help. But Tomioka would find him and tell him that it's not safe around here, that he should go and basically go to home or some place that is safe for him to actually be okay. And quickly it's obvious that he is not normal, that Tomioka would realize that Tanjiro is far from normal, that Tanjiro has something massively wrong with him, at least right now, and he asks the kid if he's okay, but Tanjiro doesn't even respond. He just keeps walking, as if there's just this blank dark shade over his eyes, and he just continues to move on. But Tomioka would stop him. Tomioka would tell him that his family was killed by a demon that, well, is irredeemable, demons that need to all die, and that's where he should be focusing his anger, his sadness, and his hatred towards. And as he hears this, Tanjiro's brain would begin to connect, and it would begin to connect on the idea that these demons are horrible and they need to be punished. As the shadows would begin to basically creep up even more around him, Tomioka would realize that it's actually odd. The aura that he's giving off is something he's never seen before. Yes, he compared it to the demons, but this is even more different. It's as if the dead is surrounding him, as if the shadows are truly taking over. And Tanjiro would then respond to Tomioka, telling him or asking him what he needs to do to become like him, to become a slayer of demons. Tomioka would respond that it's, well, a demon slayer, but that's beyond the point. Tanjiro would nod his head as Tomioka would send him off to his master Urokodaki, but this interaction would be a lot different than you can possibly imagine. Tanjiro is not the go-lucky person he used to be. He's not the happy person he used to be. Now, that version of Tanjiro may still be in there, but for now, at least this version, especially without his sister, is not the person we all know and love. Tanjiro's experience with Urokodaki would soon prove to be extremely beneficial, at least for his self-preservation. Urokodaki would try to teach him how to utilize, well, water breathing, but that wouldn't work at all. But his breathing style would soon be picked up, because it's obvious that Urokodaki can see that the shadows themselves are actually helping Tanjiro and aiding him in his effective skill transition into being a demon slayer. Now, with that said, Tanjiro has to come up with his own breathing styles, and first off, it starts with a very basic one, and that is shadow breathing, first form, Eclipse. All this really does is make it so that he more or less is shrouded in darkness or in the shadows, allowing him to reach his target a lot quicker and also without being recognized. Now, this would be absolutely perfect because, well, it makes it so much easier for him to actually get a lethal blow. And he would reveal this about halfway through their training, or this breathing style or breathing form, about halfway through their training, and Urokodaki would be taken back entirely, thinking that he's never seen something like this, and they probably will never see something like this ever again. Someone that's actually utilizing their breathing style in a way that can't be explained, as if it's paranormal, very similar to the demons themselves. I mean, we see that the demons have blood demon arts, have these crazy things they can do. Something as crazy as teleporting, to even duplication, to, well, maybe even utilizing lightning or electricity, something that, well, literal normal humans cannot do. This is something that Tanjiro is able to basically acquire, this unworldly, or this, like I said, paranormal type of being. Now, his training would continue, and he would encounter someone like Sabito and someone like Makomo, but this would just be for training's sake, and Tanjiro would make leaps and bounds greater than he normally would because of his in-depth, basically, usage of the shadows. And he would continue expanding his breathing styles, actually gaining 2 more forms, but that's actually all he has time for, at least at this moment. He would learn shadow breathing second form, Shadow Meld, which Shadow Meld is more or less his way of stunning his opponent, quote unquote, and he actually is able to utilize this against Sabito. When utilizing it against Sabito, it's actually something pretty interesting. When he utilizes it against Sabito, it actually melds Sabito into the ground, actually as if the shadows are reaching out to grab him and pull him down. But it doesn't pull him down entirely, it just sets him up for a lethal blow that, well, Tanjiro can actually execute. With this training practically over, Sabito and Makomo would actually disappear, but seems to be actually become shadows. But more or less, they would become shadows. That's what I'm trying to get across. Then this would lead him to the final selection, and we know that the final selection in the first place was a little bit of a challenge for Tanjiro, but once he got his grasp on actually fighting demons, he realized that it was pretty easy, and it seems as if that he's even stronger within the forest. The reason for this is that the shadows of all the people that have died, which there's a ton of demon slayers that actually died here, including the ones that are dying now, would actually be able to help him and actually yield even more strength while fighting. This would include him utilizing actually his shadow breathing third form, Phantom Echo, which would be more or less utilizing these dead beings. Now, these dead beings aren't super powerful or anything like that. They become more shadows, and the Phantom Echo would basically send his slashes throughout all of these beings, actually allowing him to utilize more or less a long range attack, but as lethal as his normal blade. And he's able to do this against the Hand Demon, because the Hand Demon already obviously hides his neck, but with the Phantom Echo form, he's able to slice through it without the Hand Demon even realizing that he's going to slice through it, which shocks everybody that is currently watching. And he would continue destroying and killing every last demon within the, well, we know, the final selection. Now, I want to say this right off the bat, as we go into basically talking to Urokodaki once again. This is not going to be your normal what if. I mean, I want to talk about his usage of shadow breathing and what kind of fantasy this would bring. But a lot of these earlier on fights would not matter as much as you would possibly imagine. I mean, this happens sometimes when you're giving someone a very creative version of a different form or a different breathing style that literally doesn't exist. But that's kind of beyond the point. I just wanted to bring that up, frankly, before we continue on. Now, with that said, this would lead him to speaking with Urokodaki after the final selection, Urokodaki being happy that he survived, and you could see that a little bit of Tanjiro's emotion begins to kind of squeak out, because a lot of that emotion was buried away and hidden, but now it's kind of trickling out once again, and this actually is a good portion of him getting back to where he used to be. But at the same time, he's still going to use that dark place because he needs the shadows to survive. Now, Urokodaki would tell him to find joy in something in this life, and if that means finding a partner, if that means finding some friends, and if that means more or less finding a use of his own life, that he needs to find that, because that will make him even stronger than he could possibly imagine, and he wants to see the boy smile once again. And Tanjiro says to him that he will smile one day, but that's just not who he is at this moment, at least not anymore. That version of Tanjiro that once took care of his family, that version of Tanjiro that would smile in the face of everything, is no longer here at this moment, but we're progressively getting him back throughout this time. But as he utilizes more or less the shadows and the darkness to actually defeat these demons, it seems like it brings a little bit more of that light that he used to have throughout this time. See, this is what leads us to more or less the Swamp Demon. The Swamp Demon would be a very easy fight for Tanjiro, especially because of more or less what I've said that he's able to use. The Shadow Meld, or the second form of Shadow Breathing, would be perfect to stop the, well, Swamp Demon from moving around recklessly or endlessly, and he would be able to get a crucial and lethal blow. On top of that, we know that there are multiple dead bodies very near this area for Tanjiro to utilize as more or less shadows. And like I said before, the more abundant of shadows, the better some of his forms would actually be. And that'd be just on the case of basically people from the afterlife, or a remnants of them. That's kind of where I kind of talk about it, or how I think about it, is that the remnant of them is kind of the way he's able to utilize them. Because a lot of these people are in the afterlife. They're not stuck here as shadows, but it is a remnant of them. The remnant that was the lost soul, the soul that basically or part of the soul that got separated from them when they went on to the peaceful living of the afterlife. Now, the Swamp Demon, easy work, and it's a very easy thing. Now, with that said, when he meets Muzan for the very first time, it is a pretty awkward encounter, but the part of him that still wants to have that light, that get rid of a little bit of that darkness, decides not to try and fight Muzan. I mean, there's not necessarily a way that he'll beat him anyways at the moment, but still, it's not like he could, or it's not like he should go and try to kill him when there's so many humans just all around, when there's so many people all around. I mean, he knows what would happen if he did. This would lead him to basically fighting the normal two demons that he wouldn't necessarily fight. He would speak to Lady Tamayao and Yushiro, but in all reality, he has no Nezuko. So he doesn't just immediately say that, oh, we need to cure the demons. But as he's frustrated and talking about this so-called Muzan, he does bring up the fact that he wishes that he could strip the demonhood from some of these demons, and the idea of the cure would eventually arise. But let's be honest, the cure would be a pretty difficult one to make. So let's hope that this version of Tanjiro, which in my opinion he is, a little bit more proactive when getting the actual blood of every demon he possibly can that is of high level strength, because we know that Tanjiro is a little lackluster at doing that, or well, I guess that's a little unfair to say. He's lackluster in doing it because of how many people are trying to kill him, or how many demons are trying to kill him. Now, with that said, this leads us on to more or less meeting Zenitsu, and then in the mansion eventually meeting Inosuke. And the whole box scenario doesn't even occur because Nezuko isn't alive. They're all shadows, but Zenitsu would actually look at him and kind of be afraid of Tanjiro. I mean, especially when Tanjiro tells him to stop being stupid and drags him along, more or less, to go take on this mansion. And actually the senses of Inosuke, more or less his sense of smell and just his ability to sense around him, would realize that Tanjiro is more or less carrying a massive amount of dark energy, or basically a ton of spirits, carrying a kind of a line of dead bodies, you could even say. But Inosuke would even confront him after they do kill the demons like Kyogai and stuff like that. But he would confront him saying that Tanjiro must be a monster of some sorts, because there's nobody that would give off this such darkness or kind of basically shrouded energy. But quickly they would realize that he's innocent, that Tanjiro has nothing to do with anything, and they don't have to worry about that. But the three of them would eventually team up, and they would go head off to their normal locations. And this is where things actually come to pass pretty quickly, because when they arrive at the Mount Natagumo Arc, or basically to face off with Rui's family, this is a lot easier. There's a ton of dead bodies, a ton of lifeless souls, and a ton of shadows that could be utilized for Tanjiro. Tanjiro would begin to actually kind of just destroy all of these demons, and he grabs blood from every last one of them just to make sure that they're all prepared to go. Because even fighting the father spider demon, they're actually successful in doing so because of Tanjiro. And Tanjiro's able to more or less get openings to slice his neck. Even though his neck is tough, Tanjiro and Inosuke should be able to actually defeat him in this regard, because of both Tanjiro being stronger, especially with his utilization of more or less his second form, that being Shadow Meld, to give them wide open openings, more or less, to actually kill him. This would actually lead them down the path of having Inosuke and Tanjiro facing off with Rui. But this fight is pretty damn difficult, especially because, well, we know that Rui is already tough, and Nezuko was a big part of fighting this guy. But luckily enough, there's a trail of more or less unfortunate souls at this moment, or passed away demon slayers, that are basically leaving a small remnant for Tanjiro. And this would lead them to basically utilizing the extra shadows within the forest. And frankly, there's a lot of them because of how many dead people were here at once, or once before. This would lead him to more or less actually utilizing his next form, and that would be his fourth form, and one of his last ones being that of Shadow Breathing fourth form, Twilight Mirage. This would allow him to more or less fuse within everybody itself, except for Inosuke. he actually begins to infuse with all the shadows, and the shadows begin to more or less kind of look like him. And this would allow them to more or less get the jump on Rui every time they even swing. And Inosuke can play kind of decoy, where he dives in and basically Rui thinks that he's going to more or less go in for the kill, but he's actually dragged away by a Twilight Mirage of Tanjiro, or a shadow version of him, leading to Tanjiro and Inosuke simultaneously slashing through Rui's neck as a duo. And this time around, they're actually able to kill him, and this is right before Giyu actually arrives. So everybody in the Spider family, or more or less the Rui family, is killed this time around pretty quickly, and Tanjiro actually gets the blood of a lot of them because he made sure to actually get everyone's blood, including Rui, of course. And this would lead to basically the Shinobu and Tomioka eventually arriving and taking away Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu. We know that Nezuko doesn't actually exist, so that whole portion doesn't actually happen. He does meet the Hashira, but they're a little confused about what type of breathing style he has, and when it's revealed what he's capable of, it is a kind of creepy interaction. I mean, they're not really in the kind of the best state to think that hard about this so-called shadow breathing, and it's kind of scary. And Inosuke even admits that fighting with a bunch of misty, shadowy creatures was a scary thing, but it was pretty cool. But it just seems so inhumane, or like not normal, more or less. Of course, Inosuke himself is not the brightest, so he wouldn't say inhumane, but he realizes that it's not very similar to anything he's seen, especially because, well, we've seen that he's very in-depth in nature and being around boars or kind of animals, so this doesn't feel natural at all. But this would lead them to their rehabilitation training, which is a pretty easy one for Tanjiro and the group. Tanjiro keeps them on track because, I mean, he's a little bit more stern and straightforward in this version, leading them to have a very productive training. And this would lead Tanjiro to gaining even more strength and power throughout this time. And when they go and take on Enmu, it would be a pretty easy fight, especially because you have Inosuke, Zenitsu, and Tanjiro with, obviously, Rengoku, excuse me. Now, the real fight would have to be Akaza. I mean, this is the main one I want to talk about, because this is where Tanjiro, in my opinion, would gain powers that he didn't understand, or would only understand after actually utilizing them for the first time. And this would be involving the shadows themselves, but it would be involving, well, the upper moons, the trails of bodies that involve with the upper moon. And when he begins to fight Akaza with Kyojuro Rengoku, he realizes something, that he could utilize the shadows of every last person that the demons have killed. And Akaza has a trail of bodies that is absolutely insane. So when he begins to utilize those and basically allow him to gain even more strength, because soon he would realize that the shadows is what gives him strength, and that's why he has to stay basically mediated within the darkness. Him and Rengoku go head to head with Akaza, and Akaza has a massive struggle ahead of him. He struggles for a while, and eventually it leads to him actually being kind of almost killed. He almost actually dies in this regard because of the shadows and kind of the trickery that Tanjiro is able to uphold. But this isn't even the very end of what Tanjiro is capable of. It's really just the beginning. And luckily enough, he doesn't have, or lucky for Akaza, that Tanjiro doesn't have his final breathing form. So they're unable to actually finish off Akaza, even though they're able to get multiple openings. But they're unable to kill him just for various reasons. I mean, for starters, they don't have the ability to more or less not have a killing intent, and so on and so forth. But still, it's fine. Akaza barely lives, and he scampers off, but Rengoku actually lives as well, and this would put them on the plus side of everything massively. This would be bad news for Muzan. Muzan would be taken back by the idea that not only did Akaza run away, but he didn't even kill anybody that he went to go kill, and Tanjiro was a main thing that he wanted to be dead. Now, with that said, we're talking about Akaza here. Like, he's a very powerful demon, and now all we're doing is giving Tanjiro more time to develop. And that would include taking on Daki and Gyutaro, but we know that they're both far weaker than Akaza, and this fight would be drastically more easy, including the one with the Swordsmith's Village arc. And like I said, this is more of a sake of fan fiction in terms of the actual breathing style itself, because I want to speak on the final form that he's going to obtain, coming on to basically take on Muzan himself. So he would train, Hashira training arc and so on. He would have all of the benefits that normal Tanjiro would have, but when they would go to the Infinity Castle, he would learn something against Akaza. He would learn something that when him and Giyu Tomioka would take him on, it would actually be the substitute for them to learn how to more or less hide their killing intent. And that would be his very fifth form, Nightfall. Nightfall is the ability to shroud not only himself, but the partners around him in shadows, making it seem as if basically they're not there at all, and all they are is shadows. You're unable to basically see, feel, sense, or anything, and this would be kind of the substitute, and this would be the key to defeating Muzan, but also before then actually killing Akaza. The death of Akaza would be imminent, and the real thing would be the sunrise countdown, basically the fight with Muzan. But this version of Tanjiro would actually be put in a position that could actually save every last demon slayer there. And when utilizing the fifth form, Shadow Breathing, fifth form, Nightfall, he covers all of them, every last demon slayer, every last Hashira, and every last shadow itself that is actually trying to take on Muzan as well. This would include maybe an arising remnant of the shadow of the greatest demon slayer alive, Yorichi, and this would be put in a way that all of them could fight Muzan without Muzan being able to sense, see, or be even able to know where their crucial vitals are. Muzan panics, trying to more or less kill them or save himself, but with all the demon slayers in all combinations striking as fast as possible, cutting him down over and over again, there is no stopping the demon slayers, and Muzan would fall right then, right there, as the sun would then peak to its top, and more or less the sun would roast away the final demon that needed to die. And that is how the story would end for What If Tanjiro Had Shadow Breathing. I know it was a little different. I know this story was a little different. And I know I kind of like skipped through a couple things, but like I said, this is more of I want to talk about my ideas of what could occur, or basically what would happen if he had shadow breathing itself, and what shadow breathing is, and so on, and how he could have gotten it, which I know this is very fanfiction-y because he never would have gotten this in the actual Demon Slayer. It's literally impossible. But still, if you enjoyed the video, show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. I think this is actually going to be the only video for the week, just because I made this really long, and frankly my editor's not going to be happy about it. So I'll give him a little bit of a break, and I'll tell him that this is the only video for the week. Sorry about that. You'll have 2 videos, or should have 2 videos next week, but this is the only video I'll do for this week. If you enjoyed, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below, all that good stuff, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.